Morning, friends. In my last lecture, I spoke about a quick recap of the neoclassicism age, why it was called so, and a few characteristics of this particular age. Today, I'll be giving you the remaining characteristics of this particular age. Before that, I'll just discuss in brief a few characteristics which I did in my last lecture. There were a number of factors which affected the characteristics of the neoclassical age, and these all factors were different from the standard and values which were followed and observed by the previous age. Among the characteristics of this particular age, the first and foremost that I spoke about was a respect for rules, which was scrupulously followed by the men of letters. In the second place, I spoke about the classical traditions and the conventions which were followed in every kind of poetry, whether it was drama, epic, satire, ode, or pastoral, or any other form. In the third place, I spoke about neoclassical poetry being an age of decorum, the age in which there was a lot of emphasis was laid on looking right as well as acting right. And during this time, great value was placed on the manners, on virtues like self-control and self-governance, and above all on balance. One was not allowed to be outrageous or to rebel or to act out. One had to show control. On the fourth place, I talk about this age as being an age of scientific instrumentation, where the science was used to explain and glorify the wonders of the divine creation and to show to men how God worked. In the next place, I talked about the intellectual quality which had gained predominance in the neoclassicism age, where extravagance and emotionalism were not given any importance, and it was a rule of the head rather than of the heart. But definitely, it was an age of conversation that I spoke about in my last class. And I had given you an example of Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe, whose diary was converted into fiction. Now, I'll be talking about the remaining characteristics. Now, while the classical mode, when we talk about, it was not attractive to the reader, the real enchantment that drew the readers to the neoclassical literature was their wit, their phrases and diction or language. They were full or pragmatic. They were pregnant with descriptive, philosophical, malicious, critical, and even the pathetic thought. None of that shouting and lack of decorum was acceptable. This was an age of polished debate and clever talking. Now, the most talked about or the most quoted of neoclassical poets we all know is Alexander Pope. As there was an obsession of form, naturally this period gave an impetus for an artificial style. If you see in the various works of the writers, it was very important that the vocabulary should neither be colloquial nor it should be technical. It should be of selective nature. According to Dr. Johnson, it had to be selected from, now in quotes, a system of words at once refined from the grossness of domestic use and free from the harshness of the terms appropriated to the particular arts. Neither the commonplace terms, unquote, neither the commonplace terms nor the novel expressions were acceptable. This resulted in the setting and the standardization of the language. But because of this, many of the works of the greatest masters, their works were barred. Now, talking about this concept of wit even affected the literary style in many ways. The most important or significant of this literary style was its effect on the verse form, basically. The blank verse and the enjambment, they took a backseat. And what came to the forefront was a new style, that was heroic couplet. The rhymed, the end-stopped couplet, and it was of iambic pentameter lines, which came into vogue as the best vehicle for expression through drama, epic, and satire, which reigned in the neoclassical period. Now, this heroic couplet was already earlier experimented by Walter and Denham, but it was perfected and systematized by John Dryden and Alexander Pope in this particular age. It was so popular a form that for a while it even relegated the lyrical measures into the background. It seemed to be the natural expression of the intellectual mood of this age. Talking about the social life of this neoclassical age, it is basically characterized in the coffee houses, which became the magnet for the writers. London attracted a variety of men of letters from these men of letters who were each desirous of having a patron who would sponsor his writing by paying money. Professors from other spheres of activity, they also flocked in these coffee houses. It is said that at one particular time, more than 3,000 coffee houses were there. People flocked in there to discuss their business. Even Dryden and Pope, they first met in a coffee house. They spoke about like the town life and social problems. बंद हो गया?
नहीं.
Town life and social problems, and the issues was the main subject matter of poetry and other forms of literature, rather than nature and countryside. Satire also became quite popular and permanent because the London fashions and controversies provided it an unlimited scope. And for this, the necessary models were provided by Horace, Juvenal, and other classical and French masters and their masterpieces. Now, as far as we will be talking about a little about the major writers which belong to this age, as far as the major writers belonging to this age is concerned, the names of John Dryden and Alexander Pope come up as a representative poets of the Augustan age. Dryden wrote the political satires and doggerel poems and fables like the Absalom and Achitophel, Macflecknoe, Hind and the Panther, Religio Medici, and Annus Mirabilis, to name a few. Alexander Pope's poetic career is generally put in 4 periods. In the first period, he wrote Pastorals, Windsor Forest, Messiah, Essay on Criticism, and The Rape of the Lock. In the second period falls the translation of Homer. In the third, or so called the Horatian period, we have the spectacle of Dunciad and epistles, while in the fourth period, he gave us the Essay on Man and an epistle to Dr. Arthur Hull. Other poets include Matthew Prior, John Gay, Dr. Johnson, Goldsmith, Churchill, etc. Now, among the prose writers, we have Jonathan Swift, Joseph Addison, Richard Steele, and Daniel Defoe, to name a few. Swift wrote books like Gulliver's Travels, A Modest Proposal, and A Tale of Tub, to name a few. Whereas Addison wrote 274 essays out of 635, and Steele contributed about 236. Addison also assisted Steele in The Guardian. They also wrote The Spectator, and The Tetler was their joint publication. Daniel Defoe contributed by writing a journal of the plague year Moll Flanders, and Robinson Crusoe, to name a few representative works of his. Thank you. That's all for today.